guys, so this video is going to be about my travels in Norway and what we did in Norway and how much we spent in Norway. And if you're thinking about going, I hope this is helpful in helping you maybe budget and know what to expect. So we went to Norway during the month of July, pretty much for the whole month, and we flew into Oslo first, which was a really long flight, and we stayed at the Oslo Comfort Hotel, which worked out to be about $100 a night. So it was pretty expensive, but everything in Norway is really expensive. So just to prepare you, make sure that you budget, because we ended up thinking, oh yeah, okay, so we'll budget like $8,000, $9,000. We ended up spending over $12,000. So yeah, just make sure that whatever you budget for, maybe budget for a couple of thousand more on top of that. So I've got some notes here that I'm looking at. So flew into Oslo, and Oslo was so beautiful. So we stayed there for 3 nights. The best thing to do when you're in Oslo is to get a bike and ride around the city. So they've got city bikes, but every 3 hours you have to return those, and that we wanted to make sure that we were on the bike for the whole day, seeing as much as we could. So there's another place called Viking Biking in Oslo, where you can like hire a mountain bike for the entire day, I think it was. Yeah, so we ended up hiring a bike each and drove all the way, or rode all the way up to the countryside. And it was so picturesque. There were lakes everywhere and people swimming in the lakes, and there were fields and just horses running around, and it was just so beautiful. So highly recommend that. And then after that we took a train from Central Station to Bergen, and that train ticket was about $100 each, and that just took you through pretty much all the fjords, and not all of them, because there's like a million fjords in Norway, but it takes you through this really scenic tour, and the landscape just changes from green fields to just snowy mountains, and it's so beautiful. So when we got to Bergen, we had an Airbnb property booked, so that worked out to be about $70 per night, and I highly recommend having an Airbnb place, because it means that you can have all your cooking supplies there, and you have access. You can just go to the supermarket and then you can bring it all home and cook there. You don't have to worry about eating out all the time. So we had our own little kitchenette, our own little like laundry, and yeah, it was just so much easier and cheaper, a lot cheaper than the hotels, because Bergen was even more expensive than Oslo. The people we were staying with kindly let us their bikes, so we were able to ride around Bergen, although Bergen is really hilly. So sometimes we just walked our bikes around, we didn't actually ride them. Bergen is pretty much the gateway to all the fjords, so that's predominantly what we wanted to see when we were in Norway, the fjords. So we went to the tourist information, and they've got all these tours called Norway in a nutshell. You're so overwhelmed when you get in there, because there's so many fjords to see that we had no idea which ones to go on. So there were 3 that I really wanted to see, which is the Hardanger Fjord, the Sogne Fjord, and so the first one we did was the Hardanger Fjord, and that was really beautiful. So that took us to the Vårengfossen waterfall, and there was lunch included, and you pretty much, the fjord tour is where you get on this big boat and you just go through the fjords and see some beautiful mountain landscape. And then when I was in the tourist information, I noticed the Pulpit rock, which is, if you don't know, it's the most famous spot that tourists go to get their photo taken, and it's just like a beautiful massive rock with amazing scenery, and there's a hike to get there, and I really wanted to go there. So I really wanted to go to Pulpit rock, and I really wanted to go to Trolltunga, which is another beautiful scenic hike, and then a beautiful photograph at the end and beautiful scenery. So I really wanted to do that. However, the lady at the tourist information told us that if we wanted to do that, we had to, if we didn't hire a car, we had to take it through from the bus routes. It would take us probably about 4 days to do both of them, because it's south of Bergen, and we would have to stop along the way at different hotels, and again, that was going to be super expensive. So we decided, okay, you know what, let's just get the hire car and let's just do it all in 2 days. So the next morning we went to the Avis car rental place in Bergen, and we hired the car for that morning. and we drove south on the E16 highway. Make sure you take the E16 highway because that's the most scenic route, and it was so beautiful, this route. However, along the way, Alex managed to get into a bit of an accident because the roads are very narrow, so we scratched the side of the car a little bit, but that's okay. It was insurance covered that. And yeah, so we drove to Odda, which is the main city outside of Bergen, and then to Skjegedal. And Skjegedal is the place where Trolltunga starts. When we got there, it was about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and they recommend that you start the hike at about, like, I don't know, before midday. So yeah, we got there kind of late, and yeah, I strongly recommend you get there early because the hike took 10 hours. There was a little sign at the start that said, oh, take care with this hike, you know, it's a bit difficult, and you know, the weather conditions change, so make sure you've packed, you know, waterproof clothing and hiking boots, and it was just like a general warning, so we didn't really think much of it. But it was so lucky that we ended up buying hiking boots the day before because we're going to Svalbard, which I'll talk about later. And we thought, because there's snow there, that, oh, we'll probably need hiking boots. So we bought hiking boots with us. We packed some food, water bottles, we had waterproof pants and a waterproof jacket. So luckily we had all of that because this hike, the Trolltunga hike, was the most difficult thing I have ever done in my life. So it took 6 hours to get there, which, yeah, doesn't sound like that long, but it was through treacherous terrain. It was climbing up ascents that were just like impossible. It was so difficult. At one point I actually wanted to turn back. It was so hard, and apparently they have search and rescue teams, you know, every couple of days because people just don't come back. So yeah, it was pretty difficult. So yeah, highly recommend bringing food with you, waterproof jacket, hiking shoes. But the end result, the view, was so spectacular. It was just like the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life. I say that quite a lot in this video with Norway. It's just so amazing. So yeah, the walk back from Trolltunga was pretty hard because we were at the top of the mountain and I didn't bring any gloves or a beanie. My fingers were freezing. And then by the time we got back to the car, it was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and we ended up having a hotel booked, the Trolltunga Hotel, which was a really great hotel. It was the cheapest one left, which still ended up being about $100 a night or something. So we stayed there, and oh, that's the other thing, make sure you pack lots of blister packs because we had blisters all over our feet because they were new hiking shoes. We just didn't think, and yeah, our feet were all like bruised up, and yeah. Anyway, so the next day, because we were so close to Pulpit Rock, which is the other hike, which is further south down from Bergen, I just thought, you know what, let's just do it. Let's just do Pulpit Rock today. So we drove down further. We got to Pulpit Rock. We were exhausted. Our bodies were physically like so tired. And we got to Pulpit Rock, and that hike was much easier. It was probably about a 4-hour hike. So it was like 2 hours there, 2 hours back, and breathtaking views, like incredible. So if you're not a really experienced hiker, I'd probably recommend doing Pulpit Rock. It's definitely more tourist friendly. A lot more tourists there. Probably the hardest thing about Pulpit Rock was actually getting up the steps because there were so many tourists everywhere. Yeah, it's amazing, spectacular views. And the best thing about the hikes is that they're free. So yeah, that's an awesome bonus as well. So then that night we decided to, because we were really short on money, that we weren't going to stay overnight there. We were going to drive all the way back to Bergen. And in hindsight, we shouldn't have done that. We should have just stayed the night. So it was about a 9-hour drive back straight to Bergen. But we thought, oh, it'll be fine. You know, we'll do the scenic route. It'll be beautiful. And because, you know, it was getting pretty late. It was like 8 p.m. or something. And it doesn't get dark in Norway during this time. Or it does, but for like an hour. So we're just like, oh, it'll be light the whole way. It'll be fine. Little did we know that there's actually, you have to catch ferries. Like car ferries to and from like where you needed to go. So we ended up catching, I think there was 3 car ferries, and the first one we got to, like, you think that they're just open all the time, but they're not. They're open only at set times. We ended up getting to the port of the car ferry place, and we found out that we had to actually wait 1 hour until the ferry was ready to pick us up. So we ended up getting home or back to Bergen closer to about 3 or 4 a.m. So it was fine for me because I just slept in the car, but unfortunately for Alex, he had to drive the whole way. But he was fine because it was pretty much light the entire way. Okay, so after that, the next few days we just took it easy. We went to the Munch Museum, saw one of the versions of the Scream, although the original Scream is in the Oslo Munch Museum. So that was amazing because I'm a big Edvard Munch fan. And then we went on another hike because I just figured we're in Norway, why not? Even though our feet were just bloodied and bruised, and definitely didn't want to do another hike, but I really pushed through and I'm like, no, we have to see more things in Norway. We're in the most beautiful place in the world. Let's go. So we went to a glacier hike called, it was just out of Odda. So the next part of our Norway journey was going to Svalbard, and I've been wanting to go to Svalbard since I was like 15 years old. It's been a place where I've just always imagined going but never thought I actually would go. And it's a little island north of Norway. It's got a very high concentration of polar bears there, and you can go there and you can see them in the wild. And unfortunately we didn't see any polar bears, so I was pretty upset about that, but it was still a really, really beautiful experience. It was about, to get to Svalbard, to fly from Svalbard, we had to go back to Oslo. So at the end of our Bergen trip, we stayed 2 weeks in Bergen, and then we flew back to Oslo and then caught a connecting flight to Svalbard. When we landed in Svalbard, we had a tour booked for that day. So we slept in the airport pretty much for about 6 hours. We went to get out of the airport, and there was a big sign in front of us that pretty much had a polar bear and said, if you venture out further than this point, you're on your own, and a polar bear could come around and eat you, or you get attacked by a polar bear. So we ran back into the airport, and then the lady at the airport said, I'm sorry, the airport's now closed. And this was about 4 or 5 a.m. because there were no more flights. So we got kicked out of the airport. So we were just standing in the wilderness, and we called a taxi, and the taxi from the main Svalbard part of the city came and picked us up. Very, very, very tiny place though. Like, I know what the population is, but very, very small. On the way into, it took about 2 minutes for us to drive to where our hotel was because it was so small. So we actually could have walked it, but we didn't want to risk a polar bear attacking us. We saw a big seal, which was cool. Just like, you know, hanging out on the pier. And so yeah, the tour that we booked for Svalbard, the tours cost us each, it was $1,030 for 2 tours. So we did a hike on the first day. Really, really hard to do that hike because we were so tired, but it was really beautiful. I've forgotten the name of it. But yeah, incredible scenery, really beautiful views. And then the next day we took it easy and just walked around. But the only bad thing about Svalbard is that you can't just venture out because of polar bears wandering around. So we had to stay with a guide the entire time. And to have a guide with you, because they have to have a gun with them as well, that was really expensive. So we just kind of stayed within the city. Which then, by city I mean, you know, a couple of shops, and a couple of hotels, and we stayed at Svalbard Hotel, which was about $100 a night. So we stayed there for 3 days. The next day we did the tour to Pyramida, which is an island off Svalbard. Or is it connected to Svalbard? Anyway, it's a Russian settlement, so it's an old mining town that's been shut down, so that was kind of cool because Alex, my partner, is Russian, and he got to see you know, this old Soviet style mining settlement, which is kind of cool, but it's all abandoned now, and it pretty much just makes its money from tourism. And there are 8 people that actually live on Pyramida. So yeah, that was really interesting to see, so I highly recommend that tour, doing that. And apparently we found out 2 days before that there was a polar bear that was wandering around the area in Pyramida, so we just missed it, but that's alright. And in terms of eating and food in Svalbard, because we didn't have an Airbnb kitchen there, we couldn't cook our own food, so we had to eat out, and the restaurants there they're pretty much the hotel restaurants, and they serve like seal and pretty much the local hunters there go and, yeah, so they get minke whale, seal, and I was not going to eat that, so I pretty much, they have like a lentil dish, so I had that, and then just cup of noodles in the hotel, so that wasn't very exciting. But after Svalbard, we took a plane back to Oslo and then had our last day in Oslo, and that's when we saw the Scream, so the Munch painting, and then we took a plane back and returned back to Melbourne. So all in all, it was an incredible trip. Highly recommend it. However, you do need to budget. We did it all just under $13,000. That's flights included. But yeah, highly recommend doing Airbnb if you can. Book the tours early if you're going to do Svalbard. Make sure you book that early, because we had only like the dregs left, whatever the tours were that no one wanted to do, and they were still really expensive. And yeah, if you have any questions, post them in the comments down below and I'll answer any of them. And yeah, I'll leave you now with a set of photos from our trip, and I hope it inspires you to go to Norway. Okay, thanks for watching. Bye.